landscapes that merge into infinity. Heat, wind and dust draw fiery mirages on the sand dunes. A dreamlike silence is shattered only by thoughts stirring within the mind. My journey begins in this immense space and ends on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea.
Istanbul, ancient Byzantium and then Constantinople. This is the place where Europe and Asia meet. The Bosphorus, with its restless waters, marks the border and since time immemorial unites two worlds. The strait is strategic, seen to heavy maritime traffic that enters and exits the Mediterranean. Today, as in the past, huge ships majestically cross the Bosphorus. I'm here to follow their course, and I'm ready to be guided along the routes of the Mare Nostrum, to take notes and recount our journey through a documentary.
I'm following in the footsteps of the ancient Mediterranean, the one that at some point in the history of our planet disappeared, giving way to an immense arid plain. To breathe in the air that filled the lungs of its inhabitants millions of years ago. The desert and the sea have a lot in common. Infinite expanses of water or sand, oceans saturated with near and distant universes, where the echoes of 1,000 voices resound and are continuously combined, bringing back the taste of nature and history.
The Mediterranean dates back to ancient times. Today, its legacy is seriously threatened. But how was the inland sea formed? Almost 6 million years ago, the Mediterranean basin was transformed into a shallow salt lake. Temperatures rose, causing its waters to evaporate, and communication with the Atlantic Ocean, a precious source of water exchange, was interrupted. Marine fauna almost totally disappeared.
A terrible earthquake created an opening off Gibraltar, and water from the Atlantic came flooding back to the basin. It took almost 200,000 years to fill up the Mediterranean basin again. Today, the Mare Nostrum is a semi-enclosed sea. Water exchange is scarce, and freshwater inputs from rivers are limited, also due to human-built dams and barrages.
During the course of the centuries, Mediterranean civilizations developed thanks to one another. A network made up by commercial trades, techniques, ideas passed on by travelers, mariners, and sailors. Medius Terraneus, in between lands. This is the sea, the cradle of humanity that we want to describe.
The Mediterranean Sea is a legacy that needs protection. On the 16th of February 1976, the Barcelona Convention was born. It currently comprises 21 coastal states and the European Community, a sort of constitution that tackles environmental emergencies. The Barcelona Convention, under the aegis of the United Nations Environment Programme, provides the guidelines for each state to ensure the Mare Nostrum has a future. It collects information and data, manages cooperative actions between countries, and controls the state of health of the marine environment. The Barcelona Convention, through its protocols, outlines 4 main priority areas: improved coastal zone management, biodiversity conservation, pollution reduction, safety of maritime transport. These are the issues we have decided to analyze in depth.
Alexandria of Egypt, home to the library which symbolizes universal culture. In 290 BC, King Ptolemy I of Egypt achieved his dream. He collected all human knowledge in one place, over 700,000 papyrus rolls. For 5 centuries, the city became the meeting place for scientists, historians, and philosophers. Ptolemy's dream was shattered under the blows of the Roman emperors. The library went up in flames, and since then became a legend. Today, it has recovered its ancient splendor. Like the phoenix, it has risen from its ashes to restore an age-old cultural tradition and reopen the doors to knowledge.
This is where we start our investigation. We meet Mohammed Hawad, director of the Mediterranean Research Center of Alexandria.
The whole idea of cosmopolitanism and the universality of Alexandria starts with its foundation by Alexander the Great, 331 BC. And the idea of Alexandria was to create an open city, a city of the world, a universal polis, like we call it. And the idea of Alexander was to have these different cities where different cultures of the world can meet in one common universal culture, which we now call globalization.
We can search through millions of volumes and read countless words. The words of Fernand Braudel, a famous French historian, are particularly striking. The Mediterranean extends from the first olive tree you meet as you come from the north to the first palm trees you meet as you approach the desert.
As we travel through history, we cannot help but admire the civilizations that have built an extraordinary world from apparently unlimited resources. But who is the Mediterranean man? How does he relate to land, culture, to his origins? Furthermore, do populations within the basin share a common identity?
the River Nile, a huge expanse of water that flows into the Mediterranean. Sailing on its delta, fishermen and farmers very similar to those of ancient Egypt can be found. Yet many things have changed since then. Human activities are affecting climate change. Temperatures are rising, water is evaporating, and the flow of the Nile could be significantly reduced. Glaciers are melting and the sea level is rising. The delta could be underwater by 2090. 6 million people may have to abandon their homes.
How and when did the history of the Mediterranean begin? And what is the nature of the problems affecting it?
We are in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo to meet Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities. With his help, we retrace the path that led to the development of Mediterranean civilizations.
The pyramids of Giza are the only monument of the 7 wonders of the world that still exists.
Every civilization has left in its wake an indelible sign of its passage along the shores of the Mediterranean.
The Sumerians, the ancient people of Mesopotamia who invented writing and thrived in the city-state. The Phoenicians, whose origins are still mysterious and who became skillful seamen to strengthen their trade. The Egyptians, with their divine pharaohs and their magnificent temples. The Greeks, who refined the arts and later philosophy and politics. The empires, starting from the one of the legendary and great strategist Alexander to the Roman Empire of law and great leaders. The Arabs, who brought sciences from the desert. The invading populations of northern Europe. The domination by the Ottoman Turks, characterized by caliphates controlled by sultans of Asian origin.
Along the centuries, the sea watches over inventive men who take from the land and water the resources they need for living, who build beautiful cities, plan increasingly quicker and safer ships, and find routes that promote a network of intense commercial trade. The sea is no longer an obstacle, but a road to communication and development.
We search for signs of the past to understand present times. For many years, human beings shaped their environment in balance with nature. But then something changed.
The Mediterranean is a crowded sea. It risks suffocation from the activities of the 150 million inhabitants living on its coasts. Every summer, this ancient sea witnesses a hideous migration. More than 170 million tourists flow onto its beaches. The coasts of the basin are coveted areas for development, which is often unrestrained. What are the consequences of development that disregards this fragile ecosystem?
In the coming years, more than half of the 46,000 kilometers that make up the coastline will be built up. Unlawful development, waste production, lack of sewage treatment plants, construction of roads that run parallel to the coast are all causing a downward degradation spiral. Coastal erosion and loss of biodiversity are constantly increasing phenomena. These trends need to be inverted.
Valencia, city of art and sciences. A structure built according to organic architectural principles that restore harmony between man and nature. The blending of forms and materials highlights the two main elements of Mediterranean tradition, light and water.
At the heart of the building is the biggest aquarium in Europe. The Dean of the Faculty of Marine Sciences of Valencia, José Tena Medialdea, describes the Mediterranean marine ecosystem.
The Mediterranean Sea holds the largest number of precious, biodiverse and productive ecosystems as far as the development of human society is concerned, and also some of the lesser known, I believe.
The professor's story carries us into a fascinating and altogether mysterious universe.
In terms of biodiversity and natural history, the Mediterranean is second in importance only to tropical ecosystems. It occupies only 1% of the world's oceans, yet is home to 8% of world species. The food resources are insufficient to adequately nourish the many species populating the Mediterranean. This is why there is a limited number of individuals for each species.
Posidonia is a marine plant that lives only in the Mediterranean and is an important indicator of water quality. It is the natural habitat of many fish species, crustaceans and mollusks. Its meadows protect coasts from erosion. It is currently threatened by chemical pollution from ships that set anchor ripping their roots, from illegal fishing boats that cast their nets too near the coast.
The integrity of the ecosystem is also threatened by climate change. The warming of marine waters has fostered the entry into the Mediterranean, mainly through the Suez Canal, of many alien species that are competing with local ones. The Mediterranean Sea is a resource we cannot give up. Fishing techniques are increasingly advanced and intense, and fish catches are higher than the reproductive capacity of species. To satisfy market demand, some people use destructive and often illegal methods. Shared regulations for common resources need to be established as soon as possible. Traditional fishing is a good example of selective fishing that ensures reproduction and repopulation.
Stefano Nanarelli is the naturalist in charge of the Marine Turtle Rescue Center in Linosa, an island in the Pelagian archipelago in Sicily. Each year, thousands of turtles are accidentally caught in the Mediterranean and thrown back at sea with hooks still in their mouths, therefore condemning them to almost certain death. The sea has become a hostile environment for turtles, whereas on land, the beaches where they reproduce are fast becoming inaccessible.
Marine turtles in the Mediterranean are declining. The decline is determined by anthropogenic factors, which means that human beings are largely responsible for these animals' rarity.
Stefano has been able to create a relationship based on trust and collaboration with fishermen who bring injured turtles to the rescue center in Linosa, where they are treated and then released back to sea.
hundreds of industrial plants discharge their wastes at sea. The Mediterranean is becoming a huge dump site. Antonio Cianciullo is a journalist. He has been covering environment issues for many years.
Persistent pollution can last for many years, if not centuries. This type of pollution is generated by substances included in the list of persistent organic pollutants, or POPs.
Sewage, chemical products, industrial residues, pesticides, fertilizers, hydrocarbons, heavy metals, dioxins, solid wastes, and organic compounds. Toxic substances absorbed by living organisms that reach us by climbing the food chain. Economic growth cannot disregard environmental protection.
There are also some good examples of sound, sustainable development practices. In Igualada, Spain, scientific research suggests ways for improving industrial production while avoiding environmental pollution. Here we meet Josep Adzek, head of the Research Center for Tanning Industries.
We mostly work in the environmental sector. However, the environment has many components. On the one hand, there are wastewaters, on the other, there are solid wastes, and the third issue is possible environmental pollution.
Once wastewaters have been treated and purified, they can be returned to nature. At the end of the process, solid wastes become fertilizers for agricultural soil.
April the 11th, 1991. The oil tanker Haven was anchored opposite the port of Genoa. The explosion was sudden and deafening. A huge flaming oil slick poured out from its tanks. Ezio Amato, marine biologist and scientist for ICRAM, followed cleanup operations in the area.
It was the worst ever accident to occur in Mediterranean waters, causing an oil spill of 144,000 tons of heavy Iranian crude oil. It's currently estimated that between 10 and 50,000 tons of crude oil that were on board the Haven have settled on the seabed of the western Ligurian coast.
Tens of obsolete ships, veritable time bombs, cross the Mediterranean. Tons of oil end up in the sea following tank washing by ships. The entire basin is compromised by illegal activities that endanger its survival.
A third of the world's volume of maritime traffic enters into the Mediterranean through its entry points, the Strait of Gibraltar, the Dardanelles Strait, and the Suez Canal. Most of these enormous ships transport cargo that is potentially harmful for the environment, and the traffic of volume is destined to rise.
This is a complex issue. To better define the problem, we have asked Admiral Roberto Petruno for more information.
It is estimated that around 200 to 220,000 ships cross the Mediterranean every year. 60,000 enter through the Strait of Gibraltar. A further 40,000 units enter via the Dardanelles Strait, and another 15,000 units through the Suez Canal.
Most of these ships do not head for Mediterranean ports, but are simply in transit. The Mediterranean takes on the enormous responsibility of possible accidents without receiving benefits in return. The intense maritime traffic needs to be regulated through sound prevention policies.
The Suez Canal, the only man-made access to the Mediterranean, was inaugurated on November the 17th, 1869. Since then, this bridge connecting the Red Sea to the Mediterranean has brought tangible changes to the economic system of the entire basin. Admiral Ahmed Fadel is head of the Suez Canal Authority. We went to meet him in Ismailia.
These ships consist of all kinds of ships sailing around the world. We have the tankers, the bulk carrier, the container ship, the general cargo, any kind of ships.
Traffic in the Suez Canal is incessant. Entering ships are checked to limit access to illegal and therefore potentially damaging ships.
In the last few years, greater emphasis on environmental issues and greater respect of international regulations has forced constructors and ship owners to implement high safety standards during the shipbuilding and maintenance phases. The double hull rule is but one example.
The Strait of Gibraltar is an area of outstanding natural value, a bridge between Africa and Europe. Migratory birds cross the strait as they come from the Atlantic to spend the winter in the Mediterranean. Salvador Solis Gomez is a Spanish ornithologist, an expert on black storks.
From a strategic point of view, for bird migration and particularly for gliding birds, those birds that need thermal currents to soar and that save energy in their travels, this site is vital for their journey. It's the closest meeting point between two continents in the whole of Western Europe.
An ecosystem that needs protection. Economic growth of the area needs to be planned with foresight, in synergy with nature.
The Mediterranean is a way of life. It is an area in constant evolution, sometimes a scene of conflicts, imbalances, contradictions, but with an important legacy to pass on to future generations. The populations of this part of the world, similar yet different, have built the history of humanity. Main actor of the past, silent mirror of present times, the sea will bear witness to the future we will choose. In the past 30 years, the Barcelona Convention has the merit of bridging the diversities and searching for solutions to protect this resource we cannot do without. A commitment we should all respect.
Well now, here come some other groups going straight to the water, seemingly with the intention of diving. They come from paths and alleys, from streets and avenues, from the north, the east, the south, and the west. And yet, they all come together here. There's something magical about this. The fact that the most absent-minded of men may be absorbed in his deepest reveries. If you stand this man up and make him move his legs, he will infallibly lead you to water. If there's any water in the region.